Bonjour, good morning. Please note that some of my remarks will be in French. I'm Anne Vineroy, President of the Association des enseignantes et des enseignants franco-ontariens. Avec moi ce matin, mes collègues Karen Littlewood, Barb Dabrowski et Karen Brown, respectivement d'OSSTF la FEESO, d'OECTA et d'ETFO. Collectively, our unions represent more than 200,000 teachers and education workers in publicly funded schools across Ontario. Dedicated professionals who, each and every day, do everything they can to provide the best possible education to our children, even in the most trying of circumstances. With the 2022 provincial budget set to be unveiled this week, we are here, united, to demand that the Ford government chart a new course and reinvest in Ontario's world-class publicly funded education system. The government has routinely attempted to deceive Ontarians by claiming falsely that they are making historical investments in education. But this is nothing more than a shell game, an attempt by the Ford government to conceal their cuts by shuffling money around and calling it investment. Ontarians will not be fooled. Over the past 4 years, teachers, education workers, students, and families, everyone, have suffered the consequences of the Ford government's reckless cuts, privatization schemes, and refusal to collaborate with educators and experts. The Ford government's history of failure is well known. In 2019, they dramatically increased class sizes and slashed education funding. In the 2021 budget, the government underfunded schools by an additional $1.3 billion, taking away critical resources and programs for students with special education needs. L'historique des échecs du gouvernement Ford est bien connu. On peut se souvenir, par exemple, de la décision désastreuse prise en 2019 d'augmenter la taille des classes et de réduire le financement de l'éducation. En 2021, le budget du gouvernement prévoyait un sous-financement supplémentaire des écoles de l'ordre de 1,3 milliard de dollars, ce qui a privé les élèves à des besoins particuliers de ressources et de programmes essentiels. And throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, the government has refused to invest in measures that would protect the health, safety, and well-being of everyone in the learning environment. All the while, they have allowed the province's school repair backlog to grow to more than $17 billion, leaving safety concerns such as crumbling infrastructure and poor ventilation unaddressed. The Ford government has made its priorities clear, and publicly funded education is not one of them. With the release of the 2022-2023 grants for student needs, which form the core element of school funding, the government has set the stage for yet another inadequate and underfunded education budget, one that confirms projections by the Financial Accountability Office of the government's plan to spend $12.3 billion less on schools than what is needed to keep up with population growth and inflationary pressures over the next 9 years. Ce gouvernement doit cesser de traiter l'éducation comme une simple dépense. C'est un investissement dans l'avenir de nos enfants et de notre province. Si la réussite scolaire demeure possible et réalisable malgré le manque de financement et de ressources adéquates, c'est bien grâce au professionnalisme et à la résilience de nos membres respectifs, ainsi qu'à leur engagement quotidien envers les jeunes de l'Ontario, et absolument pas grâce à tout ce que prétend faire le gouvernement actuel. I would like to turn things over now to Karen Brown, President of the Elementary Teachers Federation of Ontario. Karen?
Merci beaucoup, Anne, and good morning. I'm pleased to be here alongside my colleagues to demand what is right and just for the students, educators, and families of Ontario. Given the Ford government's track record of education cuts, we know that the budget they present this Thursday will not undo the damage they've caused to public education over the last 4 years. A change in government is a must on June 2nd to restore public education funding and to improve supports to students and educators, especially as we have heard in a post-pandemic recovery. For 4 years, we've witnessed the Ford government's undermining of public education. We know that every day, Ford's agenda moves one step closer to his troubling privatization plan for education in Ontario. We cannot, we must not allow this to happen. We must demand a fully funded public education system that inspires and supports the success and well-being of every student. Our world-class education system is worth protecting, and there is much work to do as we come out of this global health crisis. If we only had a government who was willing to work with us to make this happen. While no one has been left untouched by the pandemic, it has had a disproportionate impact on marginalized communities, including Black, Indigenous, racialized, and low-income communities. If we are to emerge stronger, the province must support students, families, and educators in these communities and invest in the public services necessary to build a more just and equitable Ontario. Unfortunately, the Ford government has no such plan. After repeatedly failing Ontarians, we mustn't be persuaded by their new list of empty promises, made only to secure an election win. We've been here before. Families are still waiting for Ford to clear lengthy autism therapy wait lists as promised. The impact of the pandemic on learning and on the social and emotional wellness of elementary students and on the physical safety of our school communities would have been much more worse without the dedication shown by our members. It is their professionalism and commitment that has enabled schools to endure funding cuts and adjust to increasing class sizes, but enough is enough. It is more important than ever for the government to deliver a budget that reverses cuts to education and ensures a fair, inclusive, and resilient recovery. To address the immediate and long-term effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, Ontario's recovery plan must include the funding of smaller class sizes to improve student learning, safety, and well-being. Special education grants must be based on actual student needs. Funding must be increased for educational assistants, guidance counselors, social workers, psychologists, behavioral therapists, child and youth workers, and speech and language pathologists, especially in underserviced areas. Long-term, fully funded, comprehensive, culturally responsible mental health supports must be provided, and health and safety must be a priority. The road to recovery is paved with significant uncertainty and risks as the new COVID-19 variants continue to present ongoing challenges. The Ford government has shown us they cannot be trusted with our public education system. On June 2nd, Ontarians will have the chance to elect a government that believes in and supports public education. Ontario students deserve high-quality, equitable, inclusive public education system. Investment in this world-class system is the key to our post-pandemic social and economic recovery. I'd like now to introduce Barb Dabrowski, President of the Ontario English Catholic Teachers Association. Barb?
Thank you, Karen. As teachers, we have always championed and supported efforts to eliminate racism, discrimination, and all systemic barriers in our schools, and we will continue to advocate for action to address inequities in our publicly funded education system and communities. Black, racialized, and other equity-seeking students and their families, including those from socioeconomically disadvantaged groups, as well as Indigenous students, have suffered extreme and disproportionate ill effects from the Ford government's refusal to address COVID-19 in our schools and communities, making action and investment more pressing than ever. All students in Ontario deserve a rich educational experience and learning environment. The Ford government must provide the needed investment so that equity-deserving Indigenous and disadvantaged students are immediately provided with greater access to resources, learning materials, and opportunities. But reforms to publicly funded education alone cannot resolve these challenges. They cannot address the devastating impact of child poverty in our classrooms that we as teachers see every day through the eyes of our students and their families. To address the root causes of disadvantage, the Ford government must prioritize poverty reduction, robust and affordable publicly funded child care, and improved access to mental health resources with the needed attention, action, and investment. And to address racism in our schools, all education staff need access to equity and anti-racism training to ensure that every school is a welcoming and loving environment for every student to learn and grow in. Successful de-streaming is another essential element in addressing these inequities. Unfortunately, again, the Ford government's announcements to date regarding de-streaming have been performative anti-discrimination policy. By pursuing de-streaming without providing additional supports for students, smaller class sizes so that teachers can provide greater individual attention and differentiated instruction, revamped curricula, implementation training for educators, or meaningful collaboration with educators, the government risks jeopardizing the success of any de-streaming efforts. The inequality in our schools has also been exacerbated by the Ford government's failed hybrid learning model, where educators are required to deliver instruction to students in person and online simultaneously. Originally adopted as an emergency pandemic response, the reckless funding cuts pursued by the Ford government and lack of pandemic health and safety measures have forced an increasing number of school boards to turn to this fractured model of learning to the detriment of all students and teachers. Our students deserve the full attention of a dedicated teacher. When teachers are forced to split their attention between students in class and online, it compromises the learning experience for everyone. We're in the midst of two pandemics, with evidence showing time and again that COVID-19 is having a disproportionate impact on Indigenous and equity-seeking communities, including women, Black, racialized, and other socioeconomically disadvantaged groups, exacerbating and further widening Ontario's existing equity gaps. As teachers, we have taken every opportunity, as we are again today, in advance of the 2022 provincial budget, to urge the Ford government to immediately invest in publicly funded education and our essential public services to address inequality in our schools and wider society. Our students deserve nothing less. And now I will pass it on to OSSTF President Karen Littlewood.
Thank you, Anne. Barb, merci, Anne, and Karen, thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Karen Littlewood, and I'm the president of the Ontario Secondary School Teachers Federation, la Fédération des enseignants et enseignantes de l'Ontario. We represent workers from early childhood education through to adult learning, as well as in post-secondary. The pandemic has highlighted the poor physical condition of many schools and the impact that physical infrastructure has on learning conditions for students and working conditions for teachers and education workers. The alarming backlog in school repairs, which totals more than 16 billion, yes, that's billion with a B, closer to approximately $17 billion, and it has grown under the current government, despite their misleading claims of historic investments. We all know we can do so much more, and Ontario deserves so much better. All students, teachers, and education workers from junior kindergarten to post-secondary need safe, healthy, well-maintained, accessible environments in which they learn and work. The government must fix the nearly $17 billion repair log and establish stable funding that is necessary to ensure students have access to the services and learning resources they need to be successful. Investments in well-maintained physical spaces and resources will not only protect, but actively improve the physical and mental health of students and staff in Ontario's publicly funded education system. But we know that schools and education more broadly do not exist in a vacuum. A robust, publicly funded education system is dependent on investments in communities and public services. When whole communities have direct access to strong public services and supports, families and communities succeed. The government must invest in all essential public services to fuel economic growth. Services such as affordable childcare, universal basic income, access to paid sick leave, and improving access to supports will help build stronger, healthier communities. Ontario needs a well-educated and skilled workforce with access to meaningful opportunities across the province. The global pandemic has revealed the deep levels of inequities in our society and highlighted the crucial role that education plays in maintaining a strong and vibrant community. Now is the time to invest in and enhance Ontario's publicly funded education system, to rebuild the province and invest in its citizens. The global pandemic has revealed the deep levels of inequities in society and highlighted the crucial role education plays in maintaining a strong and vibrant community.